No, no, no. It was no. It wasn't. How do I describe this aversion? I don't know. Somebody tells you, "Hey, don't go swimming at that beach. There was a shark attack." You just kind of start avoiding that beach, even if everybody wants to go swimming there. That's kind of what it was like for me. I had it was like a phobia. Yeah, like a definite phobia. Well, yeah, it was. I was having nightmares that I couldn't remember. In like the opposite of not wanting to be alone, I couldn't stand to be around people. I got really nervous at school. Whenever I stopped jamming with the band. Just any time I thought that there might be a chance that someone might be smoking, I'm staying away. And it lasted for a while. And I started talking my way out of it, or think my way out of it, or is a more accurate description. I started rationalizing reasons why it wasn't a real problem or a real threat, and it kind of worked. I felt better after a week or so, but then I started to hear some weird things. I got a phone call from my friend Jerry. Jerry calls. He said that him and a few people had gone out to the old prison. Yeah, there's old prison shut down in the 60s. There was a fire or something. It was a few miles outside of town, and they'd been hanging out there and getting high. And he said they had a bad trip. And I was like, "Well, what were you taking that you had a bad trip?" And he says, "That's the weirdest thing, you know." They were, just regular cannabis, man. They were just out there smoking. They were walking around doing some ghost hunting. And sun started to go down, started to get dark. They had their flashlights, had their cell phones out and stuff, and they were looking around. And before you know it, things started to happen. He described it, they thought they were being attacked by ghosts. But to me, it seemed more like he was describing sort of like a hallucinogenic shift of reality. The walls bending. He started hearing sounds like insects, rats, stuff crawling around in the shadows themselves moving in ways that they shouldn't, beams of light, shining orbs, rooms that were small suddenly seeming gigantic, like going from being in what was probably an old office, suddenly changing into what seemed like a cathedral. Just sheer mind-bending terror. Is they were screaming, crying. When they finally found their way out, they ran, and I guess it seemed as if they had been lost in there for days. Turned out it was, a few hours. Like, kind of felt like they were in a maze. And he didn't. Yeah, Jerry didn't sound good. He sounded terrified on the phone. He found it sounded like somebody who had just been through like a horrific experience, but he also sounded, weak and sick even. And he didn't come to school the next day. And that was when it started. Empty seats at school. Started hearing, there's a flu, something like that. Yeah, people calling into work. Mom complaining about no one being at the store to help her. And it was then that I started to notice that it seemed like, okay, it's, once again, something that could be normal. I went out into the backyard. I looked up. I heard a scream from nowhere. All of the trees suddenly just seemed alive. It was the birds. The trees were completely filled with birds. The sun was going down. And all of them just took off. I mean, they just spent however long going to roost, and now they just jettisoned up into the sky, into this huge cloud. Like, I've yet to ever see that many birds together in the sky in like a vortex of just movement and shifting, and the scream continued at intervals, but it wasn't like a human screaming. It was like something. It was high pitched. It was a wail, and then just as I had just stood there and watched all of that, it was over, and it was all gone. Just birds in trees. No shriek, no wail. And I looked across my backyard, over the fence, and there was a woman standing on the other side of the fence, staring at me. And she was wearing a bathrobe, like she had just gotten out of bed, and her hair was very limp and greasy, and she was pale, like so pale that I could see like the little blue veins on her forehead, and her lips were like blue, and her eyes were shiny and reflective, and she was just staring at me. And I raised my hand and I waved, and then she opened her mouth and that sound came out, and it didn't stop. And I backed up to the door, and I went into the house, and I slammed it, and I locked it, and I stood there, and I cried, because I was so scared. And that was when the power went out. I'm scrambling. There's a shelf right by the back door where there's a flashlight. I grabbed a flashlight. Cell phone was in the house. I went in, picked up a cell phone. Nothing. No bars, no connection, no internet. Dead silence. decided I was going to try to walk somewhere to see if anybody knew what was going on. I could not get the vision of that woman out of my head. I leave the house, walk out the front door. I'm going down the sidewalk. Streetlights are out. Dead silence. I hear a scream from a house off to the side. It sounded like somebody beating on a window. I was not going to be a hero. I was not going to run and find out what was wrong. And by the time I heard the gunshots, I was almost just running down the street. I kept on looking for cars, but there wasn't any. I mean, it's a fairly busy road, 2 blocks down from the house, and there was nobody there. Thinking about going downtown, I'm trying to get to Mom's store. I just wanted to find out if my mom was all right. At that point, I come across, there's a big 2-story house where my cousin lived. I ran in, just thinking there might be somebody there, my aunt, somebody that might know what was going on. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I don't think she was at home. My cousin, usually there's probably, close to half a dozen to a dozen people hanging out there at any given time. It's kids my age, hanging out, listening to music, whatever. I get into the front room. There's 3 people laying on the couch, apparently unconscious. Same weird, pale kind of look like the woman from across the street. I go upstairs, get up to my cousin's room. I open up the door. He's got like a big Led Zeppelin poster on the wall. There's probably 10 people in this tiny little room sitting around. And it smells like weed. Everyone's smoking. And they're all just staring at me as I come in. And there's no, hey, how you doing? I'm staying there in complete darkness with this flashlight, and all 10 of them are just sitting in the darkness, and the beam of the light is shining through the smoke, and all of their eyes are reflective like silver, and they're pale, and this very, very small room suddenly seems infinite. Like there's no ceiling, like there's no walls. There's sounds, like things flying in the darkness. Too big for a bird. Weird flapping sound like a bat, but huge. I could have sworn I saw faces in the shadows. And they kind of start moving. The people, yeah, they're moving. They're not, they're obviously alive, but they're crawling, like on their hands and knees, more like on their feet and their hands, like walking like spider walking, like Spider. Imagine Spider-Man crawling on a wall, but only on the floor, and they're kind of coming towards me. And their mouths are open, and they're making weird noises, like growls. And that's when I screamed and I ran.